Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior professional from the world of academia from Boston, USA, Dr. Kamal Bawa. Dr. Bawa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashutosh.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Bawa is the founder of the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment, which is ATREE, ATREE in Bengaluru in India. He's also a distinguished professor emeritus from the University of Massachusetts at Boston. So, sir, you began your academic journey in Chandigarh and went on to become a globally recognized ecologist. What sparked your initial interest in ecology and conservation?
In Chandigarh, I was enrolled in the botany department of Punjab University.
Mhm.
And the botany department had a very, very strong tradition of fieldwork
Mhm.
by its faculty. Thus, it was during these excursions into some extraordinary landscapes, especially in the Western Himalaya.
Mhm.
As a graduate student, I became very interested in ecology.
Mhm.
And then, of course, later on, my dissertation work, both for my master's degree as well as doctoral degree,
Mhm.
was based in the Himalaya. And so I think that was the sort of beginning of my interest in the ecology.
Mhm. And then, you moved to the US. Um, how did your global perspective influence your work back in India?
It was after completing my dissertation work in Punjab University, I moved to the University of Washington, Seattle
Mhm.
as a postdoctoral research fellow in the School of Forestry.
Mhm.
The dean at our school had a very strong interest in tropical biology.
Mhm.
And he suggested to me one day that I consider working in Costa Rica, where the school had a extraordinarily strong program
Mhm.
on ecology of tropical forests. They were comparing a dry forest with a wet evergreen forest, and the school had a number of field sites in the country. And he pointed out that since I have worked in the tropics in India, I might find it very rewarding to work in
Mhm.
Central America.
Right.
Thus, it was in 1970 I started my independent research program
Wow.
on population biology of tropical forest trees with a primary focus on reproductive biology and
Mhm.
population genetics in Costa Rica.
Mhm.
By 1970s, my research in tropical ecology had led to many important discoveries that began to be globally recognized.
Mhm.
Now, Costa Rica, because of its proximity to the United States, attracted a number of leading ecologists and tropical biologists from academia all over the United States. I was very, very fortunate that I interacted and often collaborated with leading thinkers in the field.
Mhm.
In Costa Rica, now I also witnessed the same extensive deforestation in the tropics as I had witnessed in India in early 1960s in
Mhm.
the Eastern Himalaya.
Mhm.
But there was a difference. In 1970s, working with many others in
Mhm.
Costa Rica, I could put it in a global context.
Mhm.
In the early 1960s, when I was in India, nobody in the academia or otherwise talking about tropical deforestation.
Right.
But in the mid 1970s, everyone in Costa Rica and a few later, the whole world was
Mhm.
talking about tremendous loss of biodiversity in the tropics.
Mhm.
And I should also mention here, some of us from that period of 1970s and late 1980s went on to become a part of the movement that led to the establishment of a distinct field that is conservation biology.
Hmm.
Thus, to summarize my very long comment,
No, absolutely.
work in Costa Rica, which of course continued until 2000s, was very, very critical in developing global perspectives on the loss of biodiversity.
Amazing. And Costa Rica is I mean, I've been there. It's an incredibly biodiverse country, and I think people are very aware. So when you talk of the 70s, it is, I can
Yes,
understand.
yeah, I think in 70s, Costa Rica probably had the highest rate of deforestation anywhere in the world.
Hmm.
But I think it was academia there in Costa Rica, working with their colleagues from the US, were able to have a lot of influence on the government policies.
Hmm.
And so today, I think Costa Rica is a very good example of reversing the trend in deforestation
Correct.
and conserving its biodiversity.
Absolutely. Well said, sir. So let's now talk about the Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment, which is ATREE. Tell me a little bit about ATREE and what was your motivation or what was the inspiration to establish this, and how has its vision evolved since 1996?
So, just as I said now, I had witnessed deforestation
Hmm.
in India, very extensive deforestation in Assam when I was working as a doctoral student in the Eastern Himalaya. But I couldn't put that deforestation in any context. As I
Hmm.
said, nobody was talking about it.
Yeah.
But then in Costa Rica, working with others, I became very aware of the deforestation crisis and could
Hmm.
relate to what was happening in India. And of
Hmm.
course, by that time, in 1980s, 1990s, many scientists in India became very aware of what was happening to our
Hmm.
biodiversity.
Hmm.
But in 1970s and 80s, I started thinking about resuming my work in India.
Hmm.
And by 1990s, early 1990s, I think it was a very different type of atmosphere in India. A number of non-government organizations were getting started. And so I took the opportunity then to resume my work in India, initially starting in the Western Ghats and then slowly moving to the Eastern Himalaya.
Hmm.
And so we had a number of research projects going on in 1990s with my colleagues in Bangalore. Although we were showing very good results and we were involved in a very large number of projects,
Hmm.
we felt that we needed to institutionalize our work for two reasons.
Hmm.
One was that the type of work we were engaged in required long-term commitment.
Hmm.
Second, although India had many good institutions at that time dealing with forestries, fisheries, or wildlife, there was no institution singularly focused on biodiversity.
Hmm.
Looking at the complexity of the ecosystems, the interactions among various components of the ecosystem, and of course, interactions among different ecosystems or different biomes, say tropical forest, alpine meadows,
Hmm.
and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
But more importantly, the interaction between biodiversity and society.
Hmm.
And lastly, I should say on policy and institutions that were needed to promote sustainable use of biodiversity.
Hmm. Hmm.
Getting out of the academic work and looking at its application. What can we do practically on the ground
Hmm.
to avert biodiversity loss?
Hmm.
So that was the motivation for
Hmm.
establishing
Thank
ATREE.
you. But tell me, sir, what are some of the biggest threats to biodiversity that you see today, particularly in India?
I think threats can be distinguished into two types,
Hmm.
what I call proximate and ultimate.
Hmm.
And I've written extensively on this issue
Right.
globally, global deforestation as well as deforestation in India.
Hmm.
I think the proximate factors are habitat loss uh, for a wide variety of reasons,
Yeah.
pollution, invasive species, species like Lantana camara are
Hmm.
spreading all over uh, India in the tropical and subtropical forests, and infrastructure development,
Hmm.
especially in recent years.
Hmm.
But ultimate, and what I call ultimate threats, ultimate, it's the policies and governance.
Right.
Policies for land use, policies for pollution, policies for infrastructure development
Hmm.
that are responsible, in my opinion, for deforestation.
Hmm. Hmm.
And basically, I think it's the lack of realization that biodiversity is our natural heritage.
Yeah.
It has immense value.
Hmm.
It is an integral part of our natural heritage.
Hmm.
It is, it is going to be critical for our economic development.
Hmm.
The goals we have set for ourselves
Hmm.
for 2047,
Yeah.
Vision India 47,
Right.
I think it will be very difficult to realize those goals
Hmm.
if we don't take care of our natural capital,
Correct.
if we don't value our natural capital
Hmm.
as much as it should be.
Absolutely right. But sir, you also mentioned that you've done a lot of research. Could you give us some idea of how some of your research has helped to change the thinking around tropical forest and regeneration in India, and how has government of India reacted to all your research?
Well, first, let me say globally, what has been the impact of my research,
Yes,
and then I'll come back to India.
sure.
And my fundamental research on tropical forest, I wish to change the way people thought about origin and evolution of tremendous diversity of trees we
Hmm.
find in tropical forests.
Hmm.
Second, it also changed the way in which people thought about reproduction in plants in general.
Hmm.
Basically, my work in the tropics led to the discovery of many different types of plant breeding systems,
Hmm.
pollination mechanisms, and flowering patterns.
Hmm.
And it was not surprising. Nobody has done that type of work in the tropics before.
Right.
And when you are working with hundreds and thousands of different types of species, you're
Hmm.
bound to discover
Yeah.
new phenomena.
Hmm.
Third, my research on population genetics of forest trees provided insights to the conservation and management of tropical forests.
Hmm.
How do we manage diversity within species, within
Hmm.
important tree species, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
And I think my work in India, done with a number of colleagues, it was a team effort
Hmm.
on the ecology and economy of extraction of non-timber forest products.
Hmm.
Uh, I think provided insights into sustainable management of non-timber forest products.
Hmm.
And it also highlighted the role of indigenous communities which harvest these products, the role they can play in managing our forest resources.
Hmm.
Also, I think our group was among the first to document rates of deforestation in many regions of India,
Mm, mm,
highlighting that deforestation in the country is very extensive. People from ATREE played a very key role in preparing the nomination of Western Ghats as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. People at ATREE, including myself, played a very large role in developing strategic conservation plans for the Western Ghats, as well as in the eastern Himalaya
mhm,
for a conservation international, and that led to investment of millions of dollars in the form of small grants
mm,
and
mm,
large grants to a number of institutions
mm,
in both regions for research on biodiversity.
Amazing. But tell me, sir, given the amount of work that ATREE is doing, how have the local communities responded in regions like the Western Ghats or the Eastern Himalayas?
I think local communities have responded very well.
Hmm.
A major part of our work is done in partnership with indigenous communities.
Mm,
ATREE is one of the few organizations in the country with 5 community conservation centers
hmm,
in different parts of the country.
mm,
And I have always been a very strong proponent of the idea
mm,
that conservation problems we are trying to address should be co-ideated
mm,
and solutions should be co-created
mm.
and jointly implemented with local communities.
Right.
Thus, many of our community conservation centers, which cover very, very large, vast, multifunctional landscapes,
Mm,
we have helped local communities establish enterprises based on sustainable harvest of biological resources.
mm,
We have helped them secure land tenure for better management of biodiversity on their lands. We have diversified streams of income by adding biodiversity to their agricultural systems.
mhm,
We have developed plans for community nature reserves.
mm,
And equally important, we have built local leadership for managing natural resources
mm,
by the
mm.
communities.
Very interesting. Could you also tell us a little bit about the National Mission on Biodiversity and Human Well-being?
Uh, okay, I will try to be brief, but it is a very important issue. The national mission is seeking to address a very important
Well,
issue.
what I'll do is I'll ask you to give me a brief about it today and maybe schedule another conversation only on the national mission.
Okay. So the idea for a national mission came up during one of my meetings with Dr. Vijay Raghavan, who was
Mhm.
the principal scientific advisor to the government of India
Yeah.
in 1918. He had the idea approved by Prime Minister's Scientific Advisory Committee in 1989, and the Office of Principal Scientific Advisor provided us some seed money to develop the full proposal.
Hmm.
The concept note was developed by my colleagues from various institutions in Bangalore. But once we got the seed grant, we held a series of workshops and meetings to have the idea vetted by hundreds of scientists and other stakeholders. And we prepared a detailed project report, DPR, that
Hmm.
is needed
Yeah.
before the government can invest thousands of or hundreds of crores in a given mission for a
Hmm.
given mission. We were making very good progress, but then COVID came
Hmm.
and interrupted everything. And rightly, the government's attention was diverted to other more pressing issues. So there has been very, very slow progress towards the implementation of the national mission.
Hmm.
But the national mission seeks to address the issue of biodiversity in all its dimensions, ranging from assessing our biodiversity to building our capacity in terms of the human resources
Hmm.
to deal with the biodiversity science. And in between, it includes potential work on climate change and restoration, on One Health, on bioeconomy, on agrobiodiversity. But some of this work is already going on. But I think the national mission provides a framework and to do work on many of these important
Hmm.
issues
Hmm.
with a missionary zeal, and that's why it's called
Okay.
national mission.
I thank you, sir. Coming back again to the work ATREE is doing and biodiversity, what are some of the biggest barriers to implement biodiversity-friendly policies in India?
I think lack of evidence-based policies.
Hmm.
And let me give you an example.
Yeah.
We are developing a lot of hydropower projects in the Himalayas.
Hmm.
And as we have seen, the devastating consequences of
Correct.
infrastructure development in
Hmm.
the Himalayas,
Hmm.
not only the dams, the roads, the buildings, and urban sprawl, and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
But hydropower is rightly, is being considered as a main source of energy. But where is the study that evaluates different sources of energy we might have available to us, say, during the next 2 or 3 decades?
Hmm.
What are the associated trade-offs with these various sources of energy, hydropower, solar, wind, nuclear, coal? I think we need to have very, very strong evidence for whatever policies, environmental policies we are pursuing. Second, I think our thinking is still rooted in the past.
Hmm.
The management of natural resources, civil society, and science has very little role to play at the moment.
Hmm.
Things are changing, I must say, and government agencies are becoming aware of that.
Hmm.
But I think the speed at which we are moving needs to be accelerated.
Hmm.
We still have very siloed and sectoral approaches.
Hmm.
Take, for example, climate change
Yeah.
or biodiversity. There are various ministries that deal with the issues, and there is very little interaction in
Hmm.
terms of what needs to be done.
Correct. Correct.
And finally, lack of human resources. We have neglected human resources,
Hmm.
development of human resources
Hmm.
in what I call sustainability science.
Hmm. Hmm. So I have time for two more questions for you.
Mhm.
How can educational institutions better prepare students to address challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss?
I think the universities must start
Hmm.
long overdue programs in sustainability science,
Hmm.
programs that bring together natural and social sciences,
Hmm.
programs that emphasize research that has immediate applications.
Hmm.
Research is integrated with action. For a very long time, the Indian educational system has neglected the fields of ecology, conservation biology, and
Yeah.
sustainability science.
Hmm. Hmm.
In some places, we have environmental sciences program, but as my colleagues and I say, many of them deal with the brown issues, pop pollution, and so on and
Hmm.
so forth, and not with the green issues. And this neglect must end. But more importantly, I think we need to follow interdisciplinary approaches to address these very complex environmental challenges. So there has to be a very fundamental shift in our thinking, how our higher education system in this particular field is organized. It cannot be siloed in the traditional university departments. You have to come up with a very different infrastructure. And ATREE actually has a very good interdisciplinary master's and PhD programs, and I think we can share our experiences and examples with many others, and we are doing so. I think recently I was in Arunachal Pradesh, and I met with the senior government officials, and they asked us to develop a plan for a model university dealing with sustainability science, and we are working on that. We'll see where it goes.
Fascinating, fascinating. And my last question, sir, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation today. What is a single important action individuals can take in their own capacity to support biodiversity conservation?
Get involved. 2 words.
Okay.
Okay. Your own body, as we now know, has a microbiome inside and outside. Your hands, even when they are clean, each hand has several species of bacteria.
Correct.
And they are not species, hundreds of these species, they are not common to your left and right hand. Get involved in your backyard, in your courtyard, in your veranda. Know and learn about biodiversity. Food plants you eat. What are they? Where do they come from?
Right.
Citizen science is developing very fast. We have portals. Learn and contribute. You can make contributions to the knowledge.
Amazing.
Volunteer time to a civil society organization. And there's so many things you can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on that note, and your very powerful message of 2 words, get involved. Thank you, sir, for speaking to me. I think, the topic is so vast that in 25, 27, 28 minutes, I could only have a sampler menu of the incredible knowledge that you have on biodiversity and climate change. I think I would love to be able to schedule another conversation, this time focused more on climate change, because that's an area that people tend to understand more, and it's the pressing need of the hour, so to speak. Thank you again for speaking.
Give me 10 seconds to say something about climate change.
Yeah.
Very often people don't realize the role of biodiversity in climate change.
Right.
Yeah, biodiversity crisis and climate change, they're 2 sides in a way of the same coin.
Yeah.
If we had not lost all the biodiversity we have lost during the last 50 years, climate change may not have been that severe.
Correct.
And then we have to remember it's the biodiversity that provides the least expensive solutions to mitigate climate change.
Yeah.
Restoring our degraded lands, making our agriculture more sustainable, because the biggest sequesters of carbon dioxide are plants and other organisms below soil and above soil.
Absolutely right. And again, absolutely right. I mean, they are 2 sides of the same coin, but we will come back again to you for a more detailed discussion on climate change. Thank you again, sir, for speaking to us, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called you.